Welcome back to today's episode of Unapologetic Living. I'm Elizabeth Elliott and I'm your hostess, and I am excited to have MaryAnn Blair. If I met her on Instagram as MaryAnn, your fitness nurse, and I had commented on another post, and I'm not really sure where the original post was, but it did happen to be about vaccines and raising vaccine-free children and how they can to thrive. Um, and I don't know if that's something that I can share or not, if that's something that you're open to sharing, because I know I did not vaccinate my kids, and that can be sort of mind turning for some. So anyway, and I saw that she also had a 13-year-old who is vaccine free, and I'm like, oh, we align. I bet we align on a lot of things. Welcome, MaryAnn.
Thanks for so much for having me, Elizabeth. I appreciate you taking the time to let me share my story and talk to your people. And you can feel free to ask me any questions that you want.
Well, I love that you, and I think one of the things which I find so often fascinating is when you have that nursing background. I don't know what brought you over to, I don't want to say the other side, but I'm sure there's a journey there. But that you kind of have maybe looked at health and wellness through two lenses now, maybe even more lenses, but in particular when we're talking about like allopathic versus all natural or more I don't, all
Hmm.
natural healing modality
For
lens.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically I'll kind of share a little bit about where I started because I am a typical kind of person that went to school. I went to Catholic school, then I went to public school. But basically, as I grew up, I did the normal thing, or I was told the same thing. Go to school, finish high school, go to college, finish your nursing. So I did, or finish university. So I did nursing, as many Filipinos do. And I was totally head on into wanting to help people. You have this idea of like you're gonna be a nurse, you're gonna help people, you're gonna help people get healthy, you're gonna kind of get them into a trajectory of feeling better. I went straight into community health because I always loved working one-on-one with individuals. I love learning about people's stories. So I started out as a case manager in the community. I never really worked much in the hospital. It wasn't something that I liked. I was already repelled by working in the hospital because I didn't like the shifts. I didn't like the flow of it. So that was kind of where I started. And then the people that I met in my caseload, they were older individuals. They needed a lot of home care. A lot of the things that they were telling me was that had I taken better care of myself when I was younger, I wouldn't be in this position of requiring home support. So I said, why don't you eat better? Why don't you exercise? I kind of got in trouble for that because they're just like, just set up the home care. Just so I was kind of already, that was kind of where things started happening. I'm like, okay, I can find things in the community. So it was starting to get toxic. I was in a corporate structure. I was working as an educator, and just if you worked in any kind of corporate structure, things start to get a little bit toxic there, right? So
Hmm.
fitness was my outlet. That was kind of what I used to get out of the toxic culture. So I love fitness. And someone said to me, like, why don't you become a personal trainer? I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can. But anyways, I took on a few clients and I loved it. It was like they wanted to eat better, they wanted to exercise more. And I said, why don't I get the same feeling as a nurse working for clients when I've got all this management consulting ability? Meanwhile, I'm here as a personal trainer and I can help a client literally go from overweight to feeling better within 3 to 6 months. So that was kind of where things started turning around for me because I said, I need to find a better way to start making people feel healthier. Fast forward, I just left nursing altogether in terms of the corporate structure. I'm like, I'm going to become something. I just don't know what it is. But I love being a nurse. I love doing the assessments. I love meeting with people. So I kept that in. So hence, your fitness nurse was kind of born. It was just something that was out there because to me, fitness and exercise is medicine. That
Hmm.
was kind of my introduction into, I guess, what you would call natural health or kind of moving towards that direction. And then I met my husband, boyfriend at the time. His brother-in-law was a chiropractor. I had a conversation with him and I said, what is that? Like, I don't even know anything about that. All I remember in nursing was that we were told that anything homeopathy, chiropractor, anything outside of the structure that's not being trained by university is considered quack, right? At the time, the word was called quackery.
Mm-hmm.
He was my first introduction to natural health because he didn't vaccinate his children, and my husband wasn't vaccinated. It wasn't really much of a topic. We didn't really talk much about it, but I'm like, okay, whatever, you do your thing. Um, but I met his nieces, or yeah, I did meet his nieces. So when there's vaccination days, they would stay home, so we would babysit them. And I'm like, why are you guys home? They're like, oh, it's vaccination day. So those were just little things that started planting. So I started asking questions, and he's just like, why would you vaccinate someone from something that they might not even be exposed to? So those kind of questions started coming up. Anyways, fast forward to later, we get married, I have my son. I already knew then that I wanted to go a different route. I didn't like the medical health industry. I was already going into just certain things. Anyways, I know this sounds kind of funny, but I did do a fitness competition and I had broken out into cystic acne really bad. So it took me a long time. I was taking all the prescriptions, I was on antibiotics. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Anyways, my coworker said, come see this Chinese medicine practitioner and you'll figure out what it is. I'm like, okay, whatever. I'll just get it done. She does this energy test on me and she's like, no dairy, no sugar, and increase your water. I'm like, that's it. She's like, yeah, just quit that. And she's like, what else are you eating? What are you using for sugar? I was using Splenda when I was
Mm-hmm.
competing. That's what mashed up my gut health. Anyway, so she's like, drink some lemon water, do this. I'm like, literally within a week, all I did was drink lemon water and my face was gone, my face cleared up. So those were little things that started triggering me in terms of moving forward. Anyways, we have our son and my husband's like, we're not vaccinating. I'm like, sure, that's no problem. He was fine, no ear infections, no maybe the only time he really had any kind of raise in temperature was when he was going through a growth spurt. Um, but another thing that came up was he hadn't seen the doctor for 5, 6 years. I can't remember what he had, but I think it was like some kind of rash from school. Maybe it was even like a hand, foot, and mouth, I think at the time. Anyways, I took him to the doctor to make an appointment, and they're like, oh, he hasn't seen his doctor for 5 years. I'm like, yeah, he hasn't had to. He's like, he's not a patient of Dr. So and so. I'm like, why? He's like, because he's just not a patient anymore. But we will take him in and just check on what's going on. Anyway, so it was a conversation with that doctor, and he's just like, oh, he's due for a vaccination. He gave me this 5-page list of, you know, vaccinations that are overdue.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband's like, he's not going to take that. I just want you to check in to see what's happening with the skin, if there's anything that we need to worry about, blah, blah, blah. He's just like, I'm sorry, I can't take him on as a patient. You're going to have to figure this out on your own. So that kind of blew out of proportion. So I'm like, okay, this is interesting because unless he's requiring this doctor for a prescription, he's not going to take on my son as a client because he hasn't seen him for 5 years. That doesn't make it didn't make any sense. So there's just little things that started happening. But he's fast forward, he's 13 now. When this whole COVID piece came up, it was just something that we knew that we didn't want to go forward with. It was a big wake up call in terms of like why we decided to do what we're doing. We were dead set on making sure that he wasn't vaccinated, wasn't masked, wasn't falling for, what was going on. And yes, we did get a lot of pushback. We got a lot of questions. All those things started coming up. But I think that when you start looking at the healthcare system versus natural health, one of the things that the pharmacology industry, the medical industry really does is just separate everything. They separate our symptoms or they just deal with one symptom and then they give you a treatment with that. They give a problem, it's one treatment. You have an issue with your kidney, you go to a kidney specialist. There's nobody that's looking at you holistically. And that's one of the things that I've always looked at when it comes to people. It's like, I want to see people holistically. And I think that's what kind of drew me away from wanting to work in the hospital because I'm like, I'm not specializing in one thing. I want to know the person as a whole. So I think that's where I tell people, like, you really have to own your health because I had to look at myself at a whole. I was going to different doctors. I was going to dermatology. I was going here. I was going to these separate people who can only focus on that one symptom. And I remember the chiropractor that my brother-in-law that ended up saying to me, he's just like, if you think about what MD stands for, he's like, it's a doctor of medicine. He's just like, we take a look at them and think that they can answer all these problems, but their specialty is medicine. So you go there and you go to the doctor and you tell them that you have this symptom, they're going to give you a medicine for that problem. They're not going to give you a solution to the issue. Um, so I think those are some of the things that we have to really start training our brain around when it comes to our health. We're really the experts on our health, and it's our job to communicate that to the person that we're speaking to if we're seeking a solution for a problem. And that means knowing ourselves. That means being aware of our habits. That means being aware of who's influencing us in terms of information. And that also means asking ourselves, like, is this information that I'm being presented true? Is this true for me? Is this something that makes me feel comfortable? And a lot of the times, what the system does is that it really separates our confidence in knowing ourselves. And I think that's where we have to return back to knowing who we are and really just taking a look at ourselves in third person and being like, where do I need to make changes so that I can shift what's really bothering me or what's happening in this scenario or issue of mine? And I think that's a hard thing to face because we're dealing with life, busy schedules. That's there to distract us. And that's there to make us not feel good about our decisions. And I think we really have to step back and like, no, I made this decision. And I'm confident that I made that decision. And I'm going to tell people why I made that decision. That's where we have to return back to. And I think you're a great example of that because, just hearing your story, you're just like, I'm not going to do that. And I know exactly why.
Yeah. The interesting thing is, see, you have a science background in nursing, whereas I don't have that background. And I have gone through, I'm in the level 2 of a functional medicine certification. Um, I feel like I know just enough. However, many of my decisions have been made from intuition. And that is a very hard thing to explain to people. Well, I need the science or I need to know why. And guess what? I can't always tell you why other than I felt it or feel it in my bones.
Beautiful. And I actually am envious of people who've intuitively, and that's why I ask people, I'm like, how did you get into the stage of knowing where you are and the decisions that you made? And when I hear moms or parents tell me that this is what they've known intuitively, that is a beautiful gift because you listened to that intuition and you followed it and you had full confidence in knowing like that's the path that you're taking, no matter how many people try to distract you from that path. Because you're always going to hear people like, show me the science, tell me the
Yeah.
studies, who told you this, right? And I think when people who have known this intuitively can keep going there, I envy those people or I envy people like you because you didn't need the science, you just knew,
Yeah.
right?
But
And
for
that's
some, that's not a good answer. For some, that's not a good answer, and that's okay.
and that's where my train and I'm going to admit it, that's where my training is from, show proof. But I'll give you another story. I was a research assistant in the nursing institute. This is another red flag that came up for me, but I did it, and I'm going to say it, but like it was a study for Nestle, and it was a tube feeding study, and we did it, and the study that the data that came out of that wasn't something that they liked. It wasn't doing the job that it was supposed to. So I'm like, this is great. Let's write a paper on it. Let's disseminate this because we need to know failures just as much as we know successes from certain products.
Mhm.
They nixed the project. They
Mhm.
said, we need to sign this thing and say that you're not going to talk about it. We're not going to continue on with the project. There was no studies that was published about this. Um, there was nothing published out of this study. And I said, why are we not publishing this? They're just like, it's the money. We're not going to put any more money into it. And I'm like, oh, so it has everything to do with the money and not because it didn't help. So it's things like that where it's just like, okay, so is the study really something that we can rely on if things that we know that aren't being studied aren't being published? Right. So
Right, right.
those were some of the things for me where I'm just like, so if someone comes to me and says, well, where's the study? or show me the research that has that. I'm like, I can tell you that sometimes they might not even publish it, or it will take 10 to 20 years before the things that I already intuitively know is going to come out.
Hmm.
Hence this whole thing with COVID. So it's like, you have to do your own research, and you really just have to trust your gut instinct. And I think that's the hardest thing for moms or people that are just having to make decisions for other people, especially for children. That's where the challenge lies, because you really have to be steadfast and know that this is the decision that you're making and feel confident in that.
Hmm. Yeah, you do. You have to have, I mean, I guess faith, trust. I remember when I made that decision for both of my kids, I also knew, okay, I knew that they, okay, the way they want to paint it is that these illnesses um, could kill them, right? I guess any illness could potentially, you know, kill a child or an adult. Um,
Mhm.
but that I did it with intention, to not harm them, but I also knew in making that choice, I had to make equally proactive choices, actually. And now in hindsight, I don't know that I would maybe say the same exact thing um, in the way I raised them, getting time outside, feeding them whole foods, making sure that they were nurtured holistically. That was going to be taking place either way. There were probably other decisions that I made um, that I might have made differently, but I was going to go the extra mile because
Mhm.
at that time I still felt maybe that I felt confident in my decision, but then there could have been at 24 because I was 24. Well, and in hindsight, now I'm just thinking, okay, a child born, why are we inundating any child with all of these toxins so young?
When you think about, and this is what research is showing now, that a baby that's born is already has at least 280 noted toxins in their system. We don't know other stuff that's not being tested. So that's just literally from being born. And we already know that toxins are transferred from mom to baby, right? So anything after that you're doing is either toxic or healthy for that baby. So what other decisions are you making that's going to create that? And I think that's where we really have to think back, like, yeah, you're passing certain things down to your child,
Hmm.
and it has to be taken into consideration. So just like a mom would not drink alcohol, so because they don't want to have anything happen to their baby, what makes them think that taking a vaccine or
Hmm.
eating unhealthy is also not going to be transferred to that child? Those are
Right.
decisions that a mom has to make.
Yeah. But I guess I think, okay, so let's say, I mean, like my kids never had McDonald's with me. We didn't, like that was a thing. We just never did
Yeah.
it. And but even if, okay, let's just say I had a baby right this minute, and just I wouldn't, and even if I was feeding them McDonald's, I still wouldn't vaccinate them. Or does I and if like I'm not, but it almost seems like a double whammy if you vaccinate, even if you continue, if one were to continue to choose to not pick the highest and best diet, the cleanest, most pure diet. I still think, I mean, this is me personally, the unvaccinated child, it's just less toxins that little human has to filter out, even if you're still choosing highly
Yeah.
processed foods or
Yeah.
you're not
And
breastfeeding. Really.
exactly. And look around, like, I think especially when you're a new mom and you're dealing with having a child with you, and you're raising them, and they're crying, and your whole day, like, you don't even know if you brushed your teeth that day. You
Hmm.
really have to ask for help,
Hmm.
ask for resources. And I know that women, it's, we're raised, or we're raised to believe that we have to do things on our own. Like that was our culture, right? Like, do things on your own. You're an independent woman, figure it out. And I think that was another thing that was planted into us women because back then, like women were raised with a village. They were raised with help being helped by other people. And I know that when I had my son, if it wasn't for my girlfriends to help me
Mhm.
communicate with my son, like I said, I didn't want my son to be crying because I didn't know what was going on. I had a girlfriend that said, there's baby sign language. I'm like, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
That was magical for me. Like as soon as my son was like, as soon as I taught him sign language, he was already talking before he can even speak. And then another girlfriend of mine taught me about sleeping positions, like how do you know the baby, like I'm like, do I have to get up and be on this rocking chair while I'm breastfeeding? And my girlfriend was just like, you can lie down in bed and breastfeed them and you can take a little bit nap. They'll push you or they'll cry if you're choking, like you're not going to kill them. So just little things like that just reassures you as a mom that you can get support. I think that's huge. And I think like even this conversation here, it's like we think that we're so outside of everybody else, like especially moms who like, for yourself, like when you make those decisions and then you're surrounded by family that are like, you're crazy, what are you doing, like who does that, like you feel like, am I the only one that's feeling this way? And then you start kind of, you either conform or you're just like you seclude yourself, but there are other people. And I think that's where podcasts like this come into play because it's like, you're in Kentucky, I'm in Canada, and
Hmm.
we've experienced the same things. We've gone through some of the same experiences. Your children are older than mine, but we're still having to deal with the same questions and conversations and dealing with the public in terms of certain things. But I think that if we can connect with each other and just be like, I'm with you too. This is what I did in that scenario. Then we're just like, okay, like we are a community as well, just as much as the other side is. And I think we just have to really reassure each other that like there's people we can reach out to. Just like what you did when you reached out to me. I'm just like, this is beautiful. I love that you're telling me these stories about you homeschooling your children. Like it's very reassuring because you hear other parents like, what about their socialization and what about all this other stuff? And I see my son and I see their kids are tired, cranky, they don't eat, they're on ADHD, like ADHD medication, and my son is just like sleeping in, studies for 3 hours, he plays his soccer, he eats really good, and he sleeps really well, and he's thriving. So how
Yeah.
can you tell me that your situation is better than mine?
I
Right.
hear, yeah, I know every once in a while my son will say, because he ended up, I enrolled him in school when he was 10. So he did not have any sort of formal or informal preschool or elementary school or daycare. And so we would sleep in, we'd have these nice, easy, slow
Yes.
going
Beautiful.
mornings. And they spent a lot of time outside, they had home prepared breakfasts.
Yep.
And uh I just think back. So anyway, he's like, well, I went in behind. I was like, son, you didn't go in behind because I was like, you also graduated high school at 19. You went through undergraduate in 2 years, and now you already have your master's. So you have your undergraduate and master's in 3 years, and you're already working in the field that your dream field, because I always promoted, please find something that you love.
Yes.
I never wanted, for me, one of the important things about homeschooling and so much of what I read when I was trying to, make that decision, and I knew it was just the correct decision, but it's nice to read additional literature.
Sure.
Um, and even in like determining a curriculum, I remember reading a book called Better Late Than Early.
Oh, yeah.
And the authors of that book, well, first of all, again, like okay, so talk about, I think we were talking about this prior to recording, just how much information is left out.
Yeah.
And so, aside from what you're getting when it comes to giving birth in a hospital, different interventions that you do or do not have to do, another place, as you mentioned, I think, where you have to advocate, or your spouse, or maybe you're hiring a doula or somebody to help you who really understands the system a little bit better to advocate for you, because it can be intimidating as
Sure.
parents. And here you're in this space. And then, of course, the vaccine information, people telling you that your kids can't go to school or hardly participate in society without it, lies. There's exemptions, you have to find them, religious, philosophical, and medical exemptions. I don't know what it's like in Canada, And I know that can vary by state, but again, no one just was forthright with this information.
Right. Yep.
And then you think your kid has to start kindergarten, and they tell you by I think it's mandated that kids have to be in school here at 6 years old, so they have to be enrolled somewhere at 6. Well, in Indiana, it's 7, and in Texas, it's 8. Okay, but a lot of people automatically just enroll their kid at 5, but the mandatory school age here in Kentucky is 6. And
Interesting.
what this guy in Texas found is that a lot of kids' eyes don't even begin to work together appropriately until 8. So we're pushing these kids to learn to read maybe earlier than they need to, which is why we see, come third grade. I remember it was, I don't know which book it was, but you literally go from learning to read and then reading to learn, and come third grade is when you see a lot of the ADD, the ADHD, the dyslexia, right? You don't see that until they're reading to learn.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And really, and again, it goes back to, it's not that I don't necessarily believe in certain conditions like this, but I think, like you said, like parents are told what developmental stage their child is supposed to be in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, but that's my child. So I know what I did to either, delay or speed up what their delivery is. Now, okay, so you can say, well, you're a nurse and you've educated before and you've got like this background. I don't believe that at all because I have moms that I know that haven't had any even high school education. They were homeschooled
Mm-hmm.
and they raised their son with good habits,
Mm-hmm.
focus, little distractions at home. They make sure they have prioritized sleep, all these things that maybe the parent just has to look at and be like, let me just think about my son's schedule for a second. Okay, I wake them up at 6:30 in the morning because it takes 45 minutes to go to school. I have to get to work by 9 o'clock. So I'm waking them up at 5:30, 5:45 in the morning to have breakfast. They're half awake. I have to give them their breakfast and all these stuff. Do you not think that they're maybe tired? They're underwhelmed in school because there's so much stuff that's happening. They're seeing lots of things in school. Like now and here, like grade 7 is now considered high school. When I was going to school, grade 7 was still middle school.
Mm-hmm.
Who are 12, 13 are seeing things like girlfriends and boyfriends and whatever they're smoking or vaping or whatever, that they're being exposed to something that their eyes can't even really comprehend what's going on yet. And we're trying to say that, oh, they don't have an attention span, or my kid is unfocused, or my kid has this condition. But
Mm-hmm.
think about their day and what they're exposed to. Maybe if we can just remove some of those things and have them really focus on the things that you want them to, like studying a one subject, not 5 in the day, like jumping from here to there, maybe making sure that they're outside first thing in the morning and getting some sunshine and having them really just soak in some nature in the beginning of their day so that when they're in school, just little changes and tweaks like that, where that can really shift how a child exposes themselves to how they learn information.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all those things that moms know. They're like, oh, I know my kids should be doing it. I know, but then why isn't it getting done?
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to a doctor now to get a diagnosis for your kid so that you can get a pill so that you can deal with the problem. We're so used to that fast pace. Give me a solution, give me something that'll fix this kid, or give me something versus like, what do I need to do and take accountability for my actions and my behaviors so that I can make sure that I'm taken care of as well as the people who are in my life. I think that's the hard part because even now I see kids who just you talk to them and they're not taking responsibility for their behavior. They're like, well, so and so did something and so did that. I'm like, well, what did you do to contribute to that situation? And they just look at you like they don't even have an answer for that. And I'm like, you have to start taking responsibility for yourselves because no one's going to take care of you for that. So it really starts with how us as parents or just adults in general, like even if you don't have children or whatever, but everything that you expose yourself to, you are presenting an example to somebody. And like you said, like, maybe down the road, your son or your son's children is going to look at you and be like, oh, Grandma Elizabeth did this. She's my example because I want to take that piece of what she did and pass that on. You have to be that person that you want to be an example for versus like, I know I should, right? Like, I know I should, but you're not, right? So that's where I think we have to really start going into ourselves and just really taking that time to look for where you can make the switch.
So I know that you um, are an integrative health practitioner, and when you open up your profile on Instagram, it says holistic detox and wellness practitioner. So is this where you um, spend your time working with clients and others, like educating and sharing how people can either take back ownership of their health? Is
Yes.
this because I know you have awesome information, some of it being controversial, bringing awareness to various truths or truth around, misinformation and how to, heal holistically through that holistic lens. Do you work one-on-one? Because I know you also, right, you have this whole body reset. Is that?
I do. So basically, when I work with individuals, one of the things that I like to do first, when I talk about detox, it's not just food or exercise or anything like that. It's really trying to detox your whole life,
Yeah.
detoxing from distractions,
Yeah.
basically. So and I said, I always love working with individuals one-on-one. I like to see individuals from the beginning and to the end. So what I usually do in the beginning with them is a real deep dive session. um, it's very unique because basically we just really get into the nitty gritty of like, what is your day? What is your schedule? What's going on? And where can we start making some shifts? Where are you prepared to make some shifts? And I'm not there to tell you what to do. I just want to help you I just want to bring some light and awareness to some areas that might be an area that might be the first domino of change.
Hmm.
Because literally, if it's just a matter of like, okay, just get outside, like sometimes I'll just tell people, I'm like, just focus on drinking water and getting to sleep on time. And literally, that can change people's lives dramatically. And they're just like, I didn't realize that all I had to do was go to bed at 10 o'clock instead of 10:45 or 11 o'clock and turn off my phone at 9:30. I'm like, literally, that's it. Your sleep will be better. So it's, we try to make things so complicated. And really, I don't want to add to your life in terms of like, take the supplement, do this exercise program, take this meal plan. I really want to look at like, what can be taken away so that you can focus on what really matters the most for you right now.
Hmm. And then obviously when we start to look at ourselves, I always think about that ripple effect. And I too am a big, like it doesn't have to be an all at once
No,
thing. I mean, because I know that can feel overwhelming and we've been
it
at
does.
this for a minute.
Yeah, and like I said, I think the hardest thing that we're so used to is like people want like just give me the plan or just I'm ready to dramatically change my life. Give me everything and I'm just gonna make the radical switch. I mean, that can work for a period of time, but it's not sustainable. And I think that's the hardest conversation that I have with clients. They're just like, give me the plan, give me the workout program. I'll start on Monday. And I'll get it all done. I'm like, we're not doing that. I said, we're just gonna literally, I just want you to focus on these three things.
Hmm.
And if those three things are hard for you to succeed in, then that's the problem because you can't fix those three things. I can give you a whole new diet and you can tell your whole family that you're making this radical shift, but it's not going to make the big change versus these three small things. If you're like, okay, I'm going to work out 5 days a week, but
Hmm.
I've never worked out since last year. I'm going to work out 5 days a week now. And I'm like, okay, let's try it. Try it for a week. And they're like, I failed at it. I couldn't do it for 5. Okay, so then let's dig into that and ask ourselves why. Because if it wasn't in your schedule in the last year, why do you think that you can get that in now? And
So,
that's a hard question to ask people sometimes.
well, and I wonder how often do they have a clear answer?
They don't. They don't.
Mm.
And I think that's where I have them sit with that because I'm like, now we need to look at your calendar because you're telling me you're busy, but what's busy versus what's productive for you? Because a lot of the times we like being distracted, we like being busy. Um, and I think when I tell people to start taking things away from their schedule, like, why don't you just take away this one grocery shop? How can we optimize that? How can we, take away this particular event? Why don't you cut down your kids' events? And rather than doing 4 sports, let's do 2. I have parents who are just like, they're in this business, they're in this thing. I'm like, but you scheduled that for them. You paid for that for them,
Mhm.
right? So um, it's not something that was thrown at you. It was something that you created. And
Yeah,
I think that's where parents find it's hard to take.
that's one that's come up like two or three times this week with talking with parents.
Yeah,
And, also, and I think that can come down to it's like, maybe removing things for kids that they've become accustomed to. Um, I think they're fearful of removing that, right? How is the kid going to respond? Is this going to be okay with them? And guess what? They may be uncomfortable or upset at first, but over time it may prove to be beneficial to everyone, right? So I think it can be fear of that, and then you've got these parents who are sitting next to other parents at on bleachers, and well, why aren't they like why, and then feeling this need to keep up with the other kids or the other parents who are keeping their kids in the activities, and again getting away from taking that ownership, um, or listening to the intuition of what they know they really need to do, but because of what the
noise.
outside world is like the messages.
Noise. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is noise. And I think that's where, you have to ask yourself when you are sitting with that other parent that's telling you all these things, and maybe you're doing some comparison, or you're like, I need to maybe feel like I'm catching up, but look deeper into their lives and ask yourself, do they look happy? Do they look
Hmm.
organized? Do they look like everything's put together? Because if your answer is no, then why do you want to do that too? It's like, I think that's where we don't ask ourselves that question.
Hmm.
Like, oh, so and so's got this big house, and so is doing all these things with their kids. Or, okay, like, do they have time together as a family? Do their children love their parents? Because I have clients where like their kids are telling them that they hate them because they don't see them. They're always working. I'm like, is
Hmm.
that the life you want? Like,
Hmm.
so those are just some of the things that we really have to sit in. And I'm working with even older people now who have lost their relationships with their younger children, and they want to rekindle that because they know that they did that. They're
Hmm.
like, I put them in everything. I gave them piano lessons. They did all these sports, and now they won't even talk to me because they're just a hot mess. And like, because you never developed that relationship. And what's really the whole reason why we want to have kids is because we want to have a good relationship with our children.
Hmm.
So what's the root cause of what's breaking that apart? And I think
Yeah.
that's where um,
So,
we really have to just sit with those things, I think.
so would you
We're not
say you work with a lot of parents, or it says, look, the busy health seekers?
mostly parents,
Hmm.
mostly people who are in transition. So either they become new parents, or they've
Mm.
started a new career, or
Hmm.
they retired, but they know that they need to make a shift in their life. And just, getting healthier is one of them.
Yeah, so your program includes, you're looking at it through this lens, and I like the baby step approach because I think when you think about having to do everything, it can be really overwhelming. So then you just give up. Um, but that you're w- looking at, because so you do workout plan, help with
I
food,
do. Everything
help
is
dig,
included. Yeah.
yeah, help them
Everything's
dig.
there.
Go
And
ahead.
I
I'm
think
sorry.
part of it too is like, one of the things, like, you're probably familiar with, like, functional lab testing. So their
Hmm.
hair tissue mineral analysis test, gut health testing, a lot of those things that doctors don't often test,
Hmm.
because they'll go to their doctors, they got their blood work, and they'll say like, oh, the doctor told me everything is fine. Yeah, because they don't have a disease to give you. You can have, let's say your blood sugar is 5.9, and to be diabetic, you're 6. The doctor will still tell you that you're not diabetic, you're fine.
Yep.
So I think that's where we have to, again, where some of the tests that we do is really taking a look at the root cause, like what's causing your fatigue, what's
Hmm.
causing your bloat, what's causing your poor sleep. So those are some of the things that I want to catch people or catch those challenges now before it becomes a disease. And if there are, doctors will only test it if they think that it's necessary. And I give them scripts on like, this is what you say to the doctor. If you ask for a vitamin D test and they refuse because you're like, you're 25, why should I test for vitamin D? I'm like, and I tell this all the time, and I'm telling to your people too, you go to that doctor and you say, I want you to put it in the chart that I asked you for a vitamin D test and you refused. I want
Mm.
that documented. And some doctors will order the vitamin D test, and sometimes they'll just put that in the chart. But you want it documented that they refused that test that you were asking for.
Interesting. That is good to know. In another conversation, my significant other has multiple sclerosis, and we specifically asked for a couple of tests, and she wouldn't do it unless he was on the medication, which he's not taking. She's never once suggested, and she's supposed to be the cream of the crop neurologist here in town. I mean, anyway,
I've,
she's
I've
she's
gone with individuals to do these doctor's appointments because sometimes, again, as a health advocate, I will go there with them or I give them scripts on what to say.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes even just saying that I have a health advocate with me or I'd like to bring a health advocate, they will
Mm,
change their demeanor. It's kind of like it's like when you buy a car, right? Like if you buy a car as a female, they're going to tell you you need all these bells and whistles because it's going to cost all these things. But meanwhile, if you bring your husband or if it's a male person that goes there, they don't bring those things. So
mm.
doctors know who and who not to say yes and no to,
And
and that's what
I wonder, is it the same in Canada? I know here it's like, well, we need a symptom.
Yeah,
We need a like, what do you? I'm like, okay, well, then just go in there and fake fatigue.
yeah,
Tell
yeah.
them this, like do whatever you
And
need to.
unfortunately, it shouldn't be that way.
Right.
But it's unfortunate that we have to go that direction. And doctors get paid based on the symptoms that you provide, right? Like they get there's a system for how they order things. It's almost like an algorithm, right? Okay, she
Yeah.
comes in with this symptom, this is a medication you're supposed to prescribe. So you might not feel fatigue, but you want this particular medication, then you do that. They've done that with so many other medications, or
Yeah.
patients will do that. It's I don't agree with that approach.
Hmm.
And I mean, there's women who are so desperate to get some kind of support or just some kind of help or some kind of referral to experts. So that's where I think that like that's where I can help um, advocate for them on their behalf. But
Hmm.
we really want to still get back to the root cause. What's happening here? Like what's happening in your home? What's happening with your mental health? Like a lot of like we know now that it's not just physical symptoms that are creating problems. There's emotional things. There's trauma that's stored in our body. There's
Yeah.
things that are happening that need to be released. So we can find those things out in different ways, but it doesn't happen instantly. You really have to peel the layers because you might fix one problem on the surface, but something else will come through. And that's just how life is, right? You can fix one thing and you're like, okay, it's all, that common saying where like there's always something. But that's part of life. We have to deal with challenges. And how are we dealing with it? Are we trying to just outsource it to somebody else? Or do we really want to take ownership and do that for ourselves? And I think that's the question we have to ask ourselves. So when I work with individuals, I have to ask them, is your approach wanting to deal with this on an outside like medical intervention, or do you really want to dig into the root cause? Because this is going to take some time. And
Hmm.
if they're just like, I just need this problem fixed, then I'm like, then I'm not the person for you because my job is to get to your root cause and heal you as permanently as possible.
So how do you keep people motivated to make changes?
I think
Because I think it's hard.
it
Right?
is, and,
They
and
they
I'm never
want to
going to say it's
revert back to their pattern, or
yes.
even though they want this desire, they have a desired result. It seems so many people don't want to do the work. They don't want to put in the work. Do you
Yeah,
find that? I don't
I
know.
do. I do.
I-
And I think I'm guilty of that. There's things that I
Sure, me
just want a
too.
quick fix solution to. But for me, it's that I've always said I love research and I love data. So a baseline is always key. And
Mhm.
that's where we can start keeping ourselves motivated by knowing that we've got this baseline. Okay, I started out with only doing, okay, I'll make it easy with exercise, but I was only able to do 5 push-ups today. Next week, I can do 10. Okay, I might feel poor in terms of muscle strength, and this is still hard for me, and I don't like it, but I went from 5 to 10. That's
Yeah.
motivating for me,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So same thing when it comes to numbers or detox. So I usually like doing like an assess, like that's part of my deep dive is like, let's take a look at all these symptoms. What are the main issues there? And what's your biggest problem? So for someone, a lot of the times it's, face or your skin. Like I really want to get rid of this acne, or I really want to get rid of this, psoriasis or whatever the case is. That's usually the biggest motivator because it's visual, right? So that's
Right.
our priority first. Let's figure out what's causing that piece first. Okay, so now your psoriasis was all over your body and your head. Now it's just in your nose or your neck. That's an improvement. What did we do? What did we do to get that there? I ate better, I sweat more, I was outside in the sun. Okay, so we know that's the baseline of habits to keep it where we are now. So now we need to step it up. So ideally, weekly or bi-weekly check-ins is what I usually do with people. And then I teach them how to do it themselves and like keep a journal or keep a record, even just a calendar or something. But then you can see where your improvement is. Like it's like the I don't know if you've heard about the book, but it's called The Gap in the Gain.
Oh, I
And
haven't heard
basically what yeah, it's Benjamin Hardy, but basically he says a lot of us focus always on the gap. Like I need to get here. I want to be there and I'm not there yet. But there's a whole gain that we've achieved that we always don't pay attention to. We're like, oh, I'm actually waking up early without having to use an alarm. Oh, I don't have to have coffee anymore. Like we don't pay attention to the things that um, we actually made change in that created the place where we are today.
that.
And that's the gain. So it's really taking a look at, okay, like I know I want to get there, but I've achieved so much more. And this is where I am. And this is where I was last year. So what's our story of our past that brought us to where we are today that we know that was successful? And that's where I try to get to my clients because we always have something to criticize ourselves about, right? You're like, oh, I want to lose weight or I want to look better here. But like last year, you were 50 pounds heavier. Last year, you were in bed and you can even get out of bed. Last year, so they don't think about that because they're already here. So what was the gain in terms of that? So really just focus on those things. And I think it's just sometimes you need someone else to remind you. Friends are great at that sometimes where they're just
Yeah.
like, do you know who you were last year? You're cranky, awful, you couldn't get out of bed, and now you're actually getting out of bed. You might still feel tired, but now you're moving more. So that's why it's great to have some kind of accountability person or a coach or someone that's going to really point you in that direction. And I'm not saying all coaches are great. Some are probably like, oh, you need to eat more protein. You're like, oh, like I actually got 20 more grams of protein than I usually do. I might not have reached 100, but I thought I did pretty well, right? So
Yeah.
you want to have a coach that has a bit of psychology and mindset and that can help keep you motivated. So you just have to, again, that goes back to intuition. So if that person that you're asking for accountability for just doesn't sit well with you anymore, then you have every right to make a switch, right? You're not married to one person in terms of like a coach or someone that's going to keep you accountable. That's where you're like, okay, I think it's time to close this relationship. I need to go to a different support person. That's all on you. That's like, I think that's the best part because I can still make that decision, right? And I think it's exciting. It's not easy, but it's something that, our body's always looking for something exciting. And I think we have to just make life exciting rather than hard.
Yeah. So what would be your biggest message that you want the collective to know when it
I
comes
think
to like their health, their wellness, just generally speaking?
I want people to know that there is better. You can always feel better. You can always feel good. You just have to know and believe that you can. You might be in a position right now where things feel hard. You don't even know what to do next or what step you can take. But if you believe that there's going to be change and that you want change, then put yourself in that space. And once you can put yourself in that space, the right people will come to you and you'll be able to receive that support. But you have to believe that you can be in a different position next year than you are today.
Yeah, I think belief is tough. I agree with you that believe that you have to believe. And that can be, I don't know if you find that. I think that can be hard, especially if you are really struggling,
Yeah.
if it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I personally believe that, I mean, even with like things like spontaneous healings, I strongly believe that we can reverse and that there could be a spontaneous healing, and that our bodies have the capability of healing themselves when given the proper tools and nutrients. And I say nutrients, I mean, like as you were saying, like getting out in the sunshine. It's not necessarily nutrients in a pill bottle or even in your food, but like it's a combination of your environment, right? Healing your trauma, and not even having to relive it necessarily. There are ways to release, right? Sound healing, some fascia work. Like there's so many different ways, but when we're nurturing mind, body, spirit, like it's a whole thing. It's
It is.
and
It is.
and and like you said in the beginning, I think it was earlier in the conversation where the medical doctor, and this is another thing I heard, like medical practice, they're just practicing, right? I mean, really, I mean, they're going based on enough information or enough people they've seen to make sometimes just educated guesses at best on what somebody has, and then they'll throw a medicine at it. But,
Exactly.
like you said, like they literally isolate a kidney without asking you about anything else going on in your world.
That's right.
Um, and stress plays a huge part in illness. If your body is stressed,
Yeah.
if you're in a stressful marriage, or finances are tight, or your job is, or even colleagues at work or toxic humans, like all of these things have an impact on our health and well-being. So it can be difficult. But I really believe, and again, so much of it, I think, comes back to mindset and belief.
100%. I totally be, and that's where I think like you said, it is where your starting point is where is your mind at when you're trying to heal.
Mhm.
You can go to Instagram and find a supplement for your problem. You can talk to therapists and see if there's a way to resolve this relationship. But again, it goes back to you. And I think part of it too is like, we really sometimes want to believe that someone else can fix us, like somehow dramatically. And I mean, hasn't life taught us that it doesn't happen that way? We can be 60 and we can still believe that it's someone else that's outside. And I'm, like I said, I'm everything that I'm saying, I'm not immune to. It happens to everybody. It's just human psychology. But we have to override our thoughts. If you think about the things that we think in our head, and these thoughts come up that are either like I'm never going to get better, or like this relationship's not going to ever improve, or like this is happening in my work, like it's not going to get better, I'm not going to make more money from that. Those conversations in your head, you're listening to something, but
Mhm.
is that your thought? Like, is that your thought? And you kind of have to step back and like, is this thought real? Because it's not real, it's a thought. And you have to either say that thought is not true and I'm going to go a different direction, but you have to step back and really be like, this thing that's going on in my head, this conversation or this script that's happening, it's just a script. It's just like a friend talking to you, and your brain is always trying to protect you. So that's where that conversation is coming from. It's trying to shield you from any kind of danger, but it's not going to create change. That's something where intuition, I think, comes in. And that's where intuition's like, shut up. I'm not going to listen to you because what you're saying is not true. I'm going to still go this direction, even though you're telling me this way. Right. So that's where we have to really create that awareness and put that gap in there, and ask ourselves, is this what's real? And
Yeah, it's almost like, and if that's going too much, it's definitely more difficult to hear the intuition, I think, to discern, right? Because you can get hung up over here in fear. I think of that, what is it that, which wolf are you going to feed, right?
yeah,
That
that's,
parable, which one wins? Whichever one you feed.
yeah. And it's true. And I think that's where we allow distractions to to quiet those thoughts. And it's not even a quiet, it's still there. And that's why a lot of people don't like silence. And I think that's where If you really want to get to know yourself, it's, spend some time with yourself. It doesn't have to be some dramatic 5 hours or 3 hours. Like literally in the morning for 5 minutes, listen to your thoughts and just let it speak
Mhm.
because it's there. It's playing a song in the background all the time. And that's what's really dictating or how you behave
Mhm.
or, the decisions that you make. And I think we have to honor just as much as we honor giving space to our children or our parents or a friend, we can quiet our thoughts and listen to that friend. Why can't we do the same thing for ourselves?
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't take, as you said, it doesn't have to be some 5 hour meditation session to just, go within for a few moments. And I know that again, with the baby step approach, it can begin with 1 or 2 minutes, set a timer, 3 to 4. But I know that like I did some work with internal family systems. Have you?
Hmm.
And like and I remember she okay, separate your critical part and do the move this part. Like when you start to kind of see it from like step away from yourself or like, oh, that's just the critical part of my psyche that wants to tell me how crappy and
Yeah.
bad or and if I can remove okay or if I go to my inner child or my teenager so that was a really fascinating way because you're like okay so then you've got this other piece of awareness that's able to like look at the various people having the conversation in your head who are telling you all these things.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of where I think that's the biggest thing is I try to tell clients like intention over impulse because we do have an impulse. It's so easy for you and I to say like, okay, it just takes 2 minutes to like take time for yourself, but there has to be an intention. When is the 2 minutes going to happen? After what activity am I going to do that? Because, me and you can give suggestions and be that. And the other person is like, oh, that's a great idea. Okay, now you need to schedule it or
Mhm.
place it in your mind when you're going to do that. That's intention that I can't give you. That's your intention that you have to put. So when anytime I give a suggestion on something new, I always talk clients first, like, okay, in terms of importance, how important is this to you? So let's say I'm just gonna make it easy, but like, okay, I don't want to eat after 8 o'clock. Okay, so that's an intention. Okay, so what are you gonna do? Okay, and that means I have to schedule dinner at 6 o'clock. Okay, that also means that I have to plan dinner either the day before. So there's more intention. And the more you do that, then you have it planted in your head versus like, I'm going to eat better or I'm going to stop eating at 8 o'clock. And then you just kind of leave that thought in your head. And then the next day when it doesn't happen, then that brain and that, the brain talk is just like, see, I told you you weren't going to do it. See, you said you're going to do it, but you didn't do it. Now you're creating less trust in yourself. And you don't want to do that, right? You want to be able to trust yourself. And I think that's a part of the things that happen when we start making all these affirmations or declarations that I'm going to do these things and then you don't. And then you create this lack of trust within yourself. And then you fall into this pattern. And that's why I said you can't tell yourself that you're going to do these 20 million things. You have to really step back and just choose one. And
Yeah.
if that one thing is so hard, then why is it hard? Then dig into that one habit that you can't do as to why that's not happening.
Yeah.
Just the one habit, not the 20, because then it gets overwhelming.
Right. Well, and so you dig into that one, and then you also look at the one that you've been successful with. I'll just start like making your bed every day. I mean, it doesn't have to be big, right? But when you see that and again, I kind of think of that. What do you call it? Did you say the gap and the gain?
Up in the game.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, there is that piece like, okay, if I look back over the last, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years when I decided I'm going to make my bed every day. So at the end of the day, it looks like I've done something awesome when I get back in that bed, right? But
Yeah.
it's one thing. So you might see all, like you said, see all these other things that you haven't done, dig into one, and then also find one
That
that
you
you've
did really
like been
well.
super successful with because
Totally.
that okay I'm doing this one then the next one becomes I think that much easier or you find the next maybe even look at the next easiest thing while still trying to unpack why this one's so hard. I don't
Yeah.
know.
And that's kind of another exercise you can do. It's like three things that happened in the day. Like I do this with my son, and we've been doing this ever since he was young. But like, what three amazing things happened today? Okay. And then what three things didn't go well? And then what are three things that distracted me from doing the things that I wanted to do? then you're intentional, but then the next day you're like, okay, I remember that I didn't plan my dinner until later time. So this time I'm going to plan my dinner. So like it's so small sometimes when you think about that, but it's huge because at the end of the day, again, then you're like, wow, I did that. Now I tell clients, I'm like, if you had a really good day because you planned it, you got your exercise in, you got outside, blueprint it, write it down and write
Yeah.
down exactly what you did. And then try to repeat those things again. And
Mhm.
then when you see it, when you do it, and when you complete it, and at the end of the day, you create that trust within yourself, you're like, that's where confidence comes in. And I think for me, that's why I ended up becoming a fitness nurse because even in a 1 hour session of a fitness piece, you go through life in that 1 hour. Okay.
Yeah.
Like you're warming up, which is like you're priming, you're exercising, you're lifting the weights, you're getting heavy. In your mind, you're like, oh my gosh, this is hard, but I'm getting it done. Like over that period of time that you actually exercise, you feel so good at the end of it. You hated going to the gym. You didn't want to go there, but you did it anyways. At the end of that session, you feel so good because you're like, I did it. Like I actually finished it. I went through the hard thing. If you continue to do certain things like that with life and any other things, then you'll feel good and you'll increase your confidence in that area. So that's where I think that people just have to like just eliminate the noise, get rid of all that stuff and just look at yourself and be like, was I better yesterday than I am? Or was I better today than I was yesterday? If the answer is yes, then whatever, what else everybody else says doesn't matter. Because I
Absolutely.
know that what I did yesterday, I mean, what I did today was better than yesterday. So
Right.
I can make tomorrow even better.
Yeah, I love that. Well, listen, I have a client at
I know.
3:15.
It was
I,
great to talk to you.
yeah, where I know. Okay, so MaryAnn.yourfitnessnurse on Instagram. Do you
Yeah.
have a website? Are there any other things that you want to like let the audience know about? I know it looks like what you have some weekly live trainings. I mean, they can find all of this, and you have a whole body reset and detox. I don't know if that's like a class. Is there a place where people can find all of your amazing stuff?
Basically, Instagram is probably the best place. Everybody comes from a different space and time, so I always want to meet you where you're at. So by all means, reach out to me on Instagram. I do have a webpage. It's the same thing, MaryAnn, your fitness nurse. But once you reach out, we can get into a conversation, and you can ask me anything, and I'll try to support you or give you a resource that you might need for that time.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. It's
Thank you
been
very much,
great.
Elizabeth. It's great to meet you. I'm sure we'll connect soon. Have a great day.
Uh-huh. All right. Have a
Bye.
great day. Bye bye.